Muted.
Good morning, everyone. This is Marlon Footracer from the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. Thank you all for logging on to today's webinar entitled Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation Fiscal Year 2020 Funding for Wellness Courts. Please note that the line remains silent. Here are a few housekeeping notes. 1. Your control panel will appear on your user screen. All attendees will be muted during this presentation. Once you call into the meeting line, please enter your PIN number. Use the chat box on your right panel to submit questions and responses. To minimize the control panel, use yellow-orange on the top left panel. Finally, following this webinar, a notification email will be sent out containing a recording of this session, handouts reference, and a link to an evaluation. Now, we turn the time over to our presenter, Lauren Van Schilfgaarde.
Hi, thank you, Marlon. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone, depending on your time zone and home location. My name is Lauren Van Schilfgaarde. I am, brand new titles, the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians Tribal Legal Development Clinic Director at the UCLA School of Law. However, I imagine I know many of you via my former position, which was with the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. And so I am extremely pleased and honored to be back and share some updates regarding the CTAS solicitation, as well as hopefully provide some guidance for both my well-seasoned grant writers as well as my new grant writers that are embarking on a very exciting journey this year with CTAS 2020. We'll highlight some of the changes from previous years, as well as go over just the general structure of CTAS. This is intended to highlight funding opportunities specifically for healing to wellness courts, but of course CTAS is a little bit bigger than that. There's lots of different funding opportunities for tribal justice systems. We'll touch on a little bit of that, but my primary focus is healing to wellness courts. If at any point during the presentation you have questions, I warmly welcome those. This is a webinar, and the luxury of tuning in live is you can ask questions live. So as Marlon indicated, you can type those questions in. Because there's a number of us, we're not going to unmute the lines just because background noise can get a little unwieldy. But please type those questions in. Marlon will interrupt me and we will address those as they come up. We'll also have time at the end of the presentation to address your questions. Before we dive into CTAS, I wanted to highlight another grant opportunity that's specific for drug courts, and this is the Bureau of Justice Assistance Adult Drug Court RFP. It's not out yet. We anticipate it'll be coming out probably this month, but it's a good structure both for how you want to organize your CTAS RFP, but you're in the zone, so you might as well put this on the calendar, because if you're already going through all the trouble of putting together a CTAS proposal, you're like 2/3 of the way there for this adult drug court one, so you might as well throw in another one. Double dipping is allowed in this regard, and so definitely put it on your radar. The major caveat with the BJA adult drug court solicitation is that it's not tribal specific. This is open to any drug court in the country, which the BJA defines to include tribal, as well as municipal, county, and state drug courts. So the competition is pretty fierce. There's both an implementation and an enhancement category, which means if you are not yet operational, you're eligible for implementation. But if you are operational, then you have to go to the enhancement category. And the major takeaway there is that your proposal has to be some modification, quote, enhancement. You have to be proposing to change something or to expand the capacity of your healing to wellness court in some regard. It can't just be that we want to continue on with the way we've been doing things because our prior grant is running out. That very well may be the reason you're applying for it, but consider being creative in how you want to characterize what your enhancement is going to be. This, like CTAS, has really grown in the size of grants that they provide. They used to be limited to just $250,000, and now both the implementation and the enhancement are up to $500,000. So pretty significant amount of money. You know, certainly space to hire a number of different positions. I note here on the enhancement category, they identify some specific areas where they would like to see a proposed enhancement. It doesn't have to include all of these, but these are like a good idea of what they're thinking. Expand the number of participants, expand the target population, which refers to, you know, we were targeting, you know, young men that were, you know, specifically using methamphetamine. We've since come to understand that there's a significant substance abuse problem in our community regarding young women and opioids. So we'd like to expand our Healing to Wellness Court to additionally serve that target population, something like that. Enhance court operations, that is a huge umbrella, could be a number of things, case management, a probation officer, a judge, all sorts of things. Similarly, enhance court and/or supervision services. This could be both personnel as well as equipment, such as buying drug testing equipment, which is a category that's really difficult to fund under general court, you know, operation services, and enhance recovery support services. A major takeaway here is that even though this grant is coming out of the Department of Justice, you can propose to fund exclusively treatment-based services that are coming out of your behavioral health, which is pretty neat. And so you can be really flexible on what you use this money for. Sorry to flip back real quick. Just as an example, we've had courts that have successfully gotten these types of grants funding things like recovery housing for some of their participants, like paying their rent in between months as long as they are a participant in the wellness court in good standing. So there's lots of opportunities here. As I noted, this is a very competitive grant. Tribes have been awarded in the past. In 2018, 9 tribes received an award, which is kind of a big deal because there's only about 40 awards. So tribes represented a pretty significant proportion, like almost 20% of the awardees. But that was a little bit of an outlier. I think more and more we have seen tribes get a bigger piece of the pie. And it's certainly true that the Bureau of Justice Assistance is interested in funding tribes. They're frequently pushing us to get the word out to tribes. They want to receive proposals. And so even though this is fierce, it's highly recommended. And like I said, you're already bothering with CTAS, so you're already there. But another consideration in putting this application together is, unlike CTAS, with this BJA proposal, it's not tribal specific. It's highly likely that your peer reviewer, the person that's going to be reading your application, doesn't have a prior tribal experience, which means the burden on you to really contextualize your community, contextualize the capacity of your court, as well as like basic things like your jurisdiction, your population, who lives within your community, what's the difference between a tribal member and a non-tribal member, and over whom your court exercises jurisdiction. Those are things you're really going to have to spell out in an application like this, that in CTAS, you're a little bit safer in assuming that your peer reviewer has at least some experience with Indian country, knows that there are things, tribes, that they exercise jurisdiction, and that jurisdiction is extremely complicated. But you know, never make any real assumptions, but I just wanted to put that out there. Okay, so with that, I really want to respect your time and keep this webinar under an hour, and so we're going to jump into CTAS. Though I see a question, could you help me with that? Oh yes, so we've had a question to post the webinar. Absolutely, I think we need about a day for this to record, but we'll be posting that. But in our post email immediately following this webinar, we will send out a PDF of this slide deck. So you'll get that immediately. Under the pending adult drug court solicitation, would a perpetrator treatment component be allowed? I think you're referring, Norm, to a violent offender. And if that's true, that adult drug court money, it does have a violent offender prohibition. So when Congress appropriated this drug court stream of money, they included a condition that the money could not be used for violent offenders. We see that same prohibition in Purpose Area 8 regarding juvenile healing wellness courts. So if our participant or our potential participant has what's considered a violent offense, and there's a specific federal definition for that, then yeah, we're not allowed to serve them. Now, courts have tried to get a little savvy with this prohibition, and they will still serve violent offenders in their program, but they have to prove on the back end, on the accounting side, that they have bifurcated the funds, that the particular funds coming from BJA with this prohibition are not going to serve this particular offender. That obviously gets a little tricky when you're using funds to pay for things like the judge. But if you can show that your judge has multiple streams that make up their salary, then I think you could pull it off. This, of course, assumes that you have multiple streams of money coming into your healing wellness court, which may be a luxury you don't have. But that's just one way that people have gotten around that prohibition.
Lauren, there's another question.
Yeah, is it worth considering a joint county tribe proposal for the BJA adult drug court? I have seen those. I'm trying to think if it was specifically with the BJA one. I don't know if the ones I've seen have been under that particular RFP, though I certainly think you can do it. And I've seen it under comparable RFPs. The one I've seen most frequently is under the OJJDP, like family drug court or juvenile drug court, but same idea. They're structured the same way. This one is just intended for adult criminal. So yeah, I think you could do it, especially if you are in a working relationship with your county and this is something that you want to explore. Yes, there's certainly no prohibition that you can do that. And frankly, I think that it's a real hot topic right now. So I think that kind of proposal would really stand out as something that would be, like, ooh, this is intriguing. We should really look at this one. Now, that being said, if you don't currently have a working relationship with your county, or you're not sure you want to do a joint jurisdiction court, I wouldn't necessarily put like the cart before the horse and try and like conjure up a joint jurisdiction court in pursuit of this grant proposal. It's just a little rushed, and sometimes, the factors going into why you may or may not want a joint jurisdiction court are bigger than just a single proposal. But if you're in that space, then yes, I think that you should definitely consider the BJA Adult Drug Court RFP. Okay, keep the questions coming. In the meanwhile, we will pivot to CTAS. This is a photo of the Department of Justice because the CTAS is all stemming out of the Department of Justice. So once upon a time, the Department of Justice issued a number of different solicitations, many of which were tribal specific, but all stemming out of different agencies. And because they were stemming from different agencies, they all had different deadlines and different page numbers and different components that needed to go into the proposal. And it was a hot mess. Tribes were basically round the calendar having to chase these proposals and having to juggle wildly contradictory different asks that were all coming out of the same department. The department finally responded, and in 2010 launched what they call the Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation. It's their attempt to consolidate all of the RFPs that are at least tribal specific. Now, we're here 10 years later. There are definitely outliers, RFPs that are tribal specific. And when I say that, I mean only federally recognized tribes are eligible to apply, that nevertheless don't exist in CTAS, have a different deadline, all of that. But CTAS is at least a good collection of proposals. Just to pivot back to the violent offender prohibition, does domestic abuse fall under the violent offender definition? That's a great question. And like all good legal questions, the answer is it depends. The violent offender prohibition, like the definition, has to do with the severity of the violence and defines like whether or not that incident would trigger a sentence of up to a year in incarceration or more. So it's possible that a domestic violence incident could satisfy the violent offender prohibition, and it's equally possible that it doesn't because the violence wasn't, quote, serious enough. So it just depends, but it does mean that just because someone has a prior domestic violence record doesn't necessarily mean that they're prohibited from being served. And in fact, like, right, that would likely be 99% of our participants, and so it would be completely unworkable. You know, as an aside, that's very much one of the reasons there's push on Congress to get rid of this violent offender prohibition. The whole premise of a drug court, of a healing to wellness court, is to serve those that are at the highest risk and in the highest need of services, aka violent offenders. But that's a policy question that we need to push Congress on, and right now we have the violent offender prohibition. So this link on our screen, justice.gov/tribal, that is where you will find the CTAS solicitation. It's also where you will find all of the prior solicitations from previous years going back to 2010, which is pretty neat. They're still all up there. It's also where you can find a list of awardees, tribes that have successfully received a CTAS grant in the past. It unfortunately doesn't provide any information besides the tribal name and the award amount, which includes like what program was actually funded, much less like what their specific objectives that they proposed. I would love if we had that, but we don't. We at least have a snapshot of what tribes have gotten awards in the past. So I mentioned that certain agencies are included in CTAS. Here's a list on the left of those agencies that are represented in CTAS. We have COPS, BJA, OVW, OVC, and OJJDP. All of these agencies have pretty much consistently been a part of CTAS since 2010. On the right, I mentioned that there are solicitations, despite being tribal specific, that are not included in CTAS. At the very top, I have italicized and put in blue this OVC Tribal Victim Services. For a long, long time, this was Purpose Area 7. However, many of you, I think, are familiar with the VOCA set-aside that tribes were finally made eligible for, which vastly expanded the number of tribal victim services dollars that are available to tribes. The rollout for sort of transferring that money to tribes by OVC has been a little bumpy. There were a couple of standalone RFPs as well as duplicative inclusion in the CTAS. It meant that there were multiple times a year that tribes could apply for these dollars. And so it looks like this year they have chosen to do just a standalone RFP and remove the Tribal Victim Services purpose area out of the solicitation. The way that they have said that, though, in the solicitation is they've still like noted like Purpose Area 7. It's just not included this year, which makes me think that we'll see it again next year. I don't know. I'm reading tea leaves. I have no idea. But it's not in this solicitation. And so for all of my victim services advocates and administrators that are trying to, spin all of these plates, put this one aside. It's likely you're going to have to be putting together a separate RFP for your tribal victim services. OVW Tribal Coalitions is another standalone RFP, as well as the Tribal Sexual Assault Services programs. Any of our TA providers, including Tribal Law and Policy Institute, they are not included in the solicitation. Many of these purpose areas, including purpose areas 3 and 8, have designated TA providers that is sort of like a, included in an award. You get access to a TA provider. They have separate RFPs, as well as the Tribal Civil and Criminal Legal Assistance. And then, just like the BJA Adult Drug Court Grant, There are a whole slew of grants that tribes are eligible for. It's just that they have to compete with non-tribal entities. And so unfortunately for us, our work is not done. CTAS is just a small selection of the RFPs we have to keep an eye on, but it's a good one. So some major changes from last year. I mentioned Purpose Area 7 has been crossed out with a pencil. It looks like it's coming back, but it's not in this year. Purpose Area 10, however, looks like it's been crossed out with a ballpoint pen. Purpose Area 10 was a purpose area coming out of the Bureau of Justice Assistance entitled Addressing Violent Crime in Tribal Communities. It was first appeared last year in fiscal year 2019. It looked really neat. It appeared to be designed to help tribes that were interested in implementing the Tribal Law and Order Act, as well as the Violence Against Women Act, and also geared towards addressing the missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis, which was cool, but it's gone. And unlike Purpose Area 7, where the solicitation acknowledges, like, we don't have 7 any this year, like, stay tuned, there is no mention of 10. It's almost like they're pretending it didn't exist. I don't know what that's about. It could be that the funding stream that was funding Purpose Area 10 was a one and only, this time only congressional appropriation. I don't know, but it's not there. The good news is that there has been a significant response. I would say pretty much every year that I was participating in consultation, one of the critiques of DOJ funding is that it's short-term, 3-year grants. It means that tribes are basically prohibited from doing any substantive strategic planning because they are confined to these 3-year cycles where they have to chase a new grant competing with other tribes. Now, the cycle and the nature of competition remain, but at a bare minimum, we have seen the grant terms expand from 3 years to 5 years, which is fantastic. It's not totally across the board. I think Purpose Area 1 still has a different time frame, but for the most part, including Purpose Areas 3 and 8, which we focus on here, they're now 5-year grants, which is awesome. So cool. The other awesome change is that in previous years, OJJDP grants, specifically Purpose Areas 8 and 9, if you were a current recipient, such as you had received a successful award either 1 year, 2 year, or 3 years ago, you were ineligible from applying for a current year, aka you couldn't have 2 simultaneous OJJDP grants where you could in the other agencies. They have removed that limitation. OJJDP grantees are now eligible to apply for both Purpose Areas 8 and 9, which is awesome. So super good news coming out of there. Marlon, I think my raising hand thing is flashing. I just wanted to check in with you if anybody had any questions.
I think we're A-okay on questions.
Awesome. Okay. So timeline. Apologies for the timing of this webinar because our deadline is later this month. One of the things I really like about CTAS is they try to keep the application window open for as long as possible. Other DOJ grants you might see only open for 3 days. This one is open for close to 80 days. But the thing I totally dislike about this grant is they open it over the holidays. And so even though we have 80 days, like 3 of those weeks are holidays where we have obligations with our family. Even if we wanted to, we can't be working on a CTAS proposal. And so you're really robbed of some meaningful time. The other major component of the CTAS is it necessitates collaboration with a number of different tribal bureaucracies. That takes time. And so the clock is ticking. We are very much in the grant writing mode right now. It closes on February 25th. The great news for future years is that this cycle is pretty steady. Year after year, you can count on CTAS coming out sometime November, December, and being due sometime February, March. So you can mark your calendars for next year that we can safely plan that CTAS is coming out. I see that my helpful friends at TLPI have uploaded some handouts. I have attached the solicitation, the CTAS solicitation that I've been referencing, as well as the slide deck that you're seeing here. So now you have a PDF that you can share with anybody that wasn't able to join this. And then I just uploaded the frequently asked questions handout that DOJ put together. As we'll discuss, DOJ has a number of handouts that they kind of bury on the website, but are actually really, really important. And so here's at least one of them. Okay, so some of the benefits for applying to CTAS. I mentioned tribal specific. You can assume your peer reviewers know at least something about Indian country. We have purpose areas that are specific to healing to wellness courts. This is very unique. Even in the BJA Adult Drug Court RFP, which is specific to drug courts, is still not specific to healing to wellness courts, right? Tribal wellness courts are different than your typical drug court model. Because of that, it's probable that your peer reviewers will have some specific healing to wellness court knowledge, at least in regards to Purpose Area 8, which is exclusive to juvenile healing to wellness courts. Purpose Area 3 is, undoubtedly my favorite purpose area, and this is because I think it's the most responsive to tribal needs in the sense that it's the most flexible. They have very few requirements for what needs to be in there, which means that we as tribal applicants can design a program that actually fits what our community needs. We can measure what is lacking in our community. We can measure where the dire needs are. We also have access to our traditional systems, as well as the creativity to design new restorative systems that are more effective and functional than your typical adversarial system. And it's through Purpose Area 3 that we can really build that. So for me, it's by far the most exciting, innovative tribal justice system building area. The counterpoint to that, of course, is that it's super competitive and it can be difficult to get. There are no match requirements in CTAS, and so you don't have to scrounge to pull together other tribal resources in order to provide a match. The BJA Drug Court does have a match component of 25%, but it can be an in-kind contribution, so most courts don't struggle too much with that. You can weave together your strategic plan objectives. If your tribe has a strategic plan, that means that they have poured a number of very significant resources into developing that strategic plan, and CTAS is designed to award that. They want to see, long-term planning, which is nice. And most tribes are already planning to submit a CTAS proposal, which means you can sort of jump on the bandwagon and include a wellness court proposal, which is nice. Some challenges. I mentioned Purpose Area 3, very competitive. Because it's so open-ended, it's not healing to wellness court specific, which means you're competing internally within your tribe for other likely legitimate tribal justice system needs. Purpose Area 3 encompasses the entire tribal justice system, including courts, which are woefully underfunded. And so there's not only external competition between other tribes, but internally, you're really going to have to make the pitch for why the Healing to Wellness Court should get access to this Purpose Area 3 funds. Purpose Area 8, alternatively, which is specific to juvenile healing to wellness courts, is pretty narrow, and OJJDP operates a little bit differently than BJA. They're pretty regimented, and they have a pretty straight line that they want their grantees to follow, which means you might have big and bold ideas, but unless you're able to fit them within OJJDP's compartment and timeline, you might struggle a little bit. CTAS is ridiculously complicated and has a lot of moving parts. It's frankly, especially because of all of the interagency collaboration that applicants are required to do under CTAS, I find it to be one of the most challenging proposals to put together. And so I think we should be really clear-headed about that going in. And then, of course, like all proposals, whether they're federal government or not, you have to abide by the limited page and formatting requirements. That's just part of grant writing. Hopefully your community enjoys some beautifully brilliant grant writer who really thrives on page numbers and formatting. But if not, you're going to get good at it, so don't you worry. Okay, so I put this slide here just for the link. I think if you can click on this right now, it will take you to a web page, but this is also available on the justice.gov/tribal website. For the first time ever, DOJ has provided a packet of sample successful applications. This is a big deal. We have been asking for this for, oh, the link is not working. Oh, sorry. Oh, so sorry.
We can post a link in the chat.
From current slide. Yes. Sorry, I don't know what I had. I hit something.
We can post a link in the chat.
Yeah, Marlon, if you wouldn't mind locating that here, I wonder if I can grab it real quick.
We have it. And then there's a second question.
Yeah.
Does CTAS have provisions or are there any dollars for detention facilities?
Oh, great question. Yes, they do. I would recommend checking out Purpose Area 4, which is specific to, or is it to, no, 4. That's specifically to detention centers as well as like justice like areas, just like, what do you call it? Like the buildings where tribes frequently house their courts and their police departments and those types of things. It's not intended for new construction, but I think you can be creative for, you know, how you characterize whether you're in like the planning or architecture phase or whether you're doing like an enhancement or an expansion. Purpose Area 4 is where you want to be. So I pulled up here, this is the justice.gov/tribal/open solicitations, which you find here. And I'm in the open solicitations box. I just wanted to find that sample. Here it is, past successful application packet. Click on this and this will take you to, it's 160 pages, and that's because they've provided a sample for each purpose area. And so this was a collection of successful grant proposals. If you are writing for the first time, I would pull this up and use this as my template for drafting my purpose area narrative. You don't have to use this. This is just one sample. It's not a model. It's just one example. And so if you have a tried and true template for your own, I would stick with that, especially because it's going to model what, like, the outline of your community better. But if you're starting from scratch, this is a good ticket and a great way to help frame, you know, all the different components that you need to put in there. Okay, moving right along. Eligibility, federally recognized tribes. They provide for tribal consortia, especially if, you know, you're teaming up with another tribe or a non-profit that's going to serve as your umbrella. Great news. They used to require all tribal applicants to submit like a document verifying that we are a real bona fide tribe, which I always thought was ridiculous because we don't ask states or counties or municipalities to verify that they're real. Why are we doing that for tribes? And they got rid of it. Yay! You still have to provide one if it's a tribal consortia, which I think makes sense because you need to verify that these two tribes have in fact talked to each other and are agreeing to do a joint solicitation, but no tribal authority requirement anymore, which wasn't a big deal. It was just like an extra attachment, but you know, on principle, it's a big deal. Some eligibility changes. I wanted to highlight this one just from Purpose Area 1. If your police department is applying for funding, they had some changes there. I mentioned earlier that there's no longer the limitation on prior OJJDP grantees. This is great. It's true for Purpose Area 9 as well, though they organize it a little bit differently, but the takeaway is if you have a current grant, you're still eligible to apply. Okay, I mentioned that the different purpose areas were competitive. I just wanted to sort of highlight how competitive they are. These percentages represent how many of the applicants actually got an award. So in purpose area 3, you can see there were 103 applicants, but only 31 awardees, which means only about 30% of applicants actually got an award. Purpose area 5, on the other hand, 95% got the award. So, you know, when you have a spare minute, flip over to purpose area 5. If you can, I would bother to just put something together because that money is ripe for the taking. Purpose area 8, 75% of applicants were awarded last year. So pretty good. I have 2018. These are actually 2019 numbers. My apologies. But note that purpose area 8, there were only 8 applicants, so there weren't a whole lot of tribes to compete with. You can see alternatively that purposes areas 9 is extremely competitive, only 13% were awarded. Purpose area 2, which concerns strategic planning, only 14% were awarded. This shouldn't be dispositive, right? Like if your community needs something, it's worth fighting for, even if it is competitive. However, this is a good gauge for, you know, what your likelihood is, what your chances are, and where you should be allocating resources, including your time. Oh, that was 2018. So this is 2019. Here we go. Similarly, you get similar numbers. I apologize, my percentages are super dark. Last year, purpose area 3 remained at 30%. Purpose area 8 dropped to 60%, but that's only because one fewer tribe was awarded. So they're about ballpark the same. You can also see what purpose areas attract the greatest number of applications. Purpose area 1, I don't think it's a coincidence. That concerns police departments. They're by far getting the most attention. But purpose area 3 is right behind. It's a very popular and competitive purpose area, and I don't think that's a coincidence. It's by far the most open-ended. I include this, so those numbers on the previous slide are based on the numbers that DOJ reports out. However, at the end of each fiscal year, you know, they provide a list of the number of awardees, and I calculate based on that list of awardees because it actually correlates to the name of a tribe. And I get different numbers than they do, sometimes wildly different numbers. So these are my numbers. These are the ones that I calculated based on the number of tribes that actually got awarded. I don't know what the deal is with that distinction. I've seen the difference in prior years. I don't know if they're including like TA providers. I don't know what they're doing, but there's still, the takeaway for our purposes is it's still ballpark the same. Okay, so here's just a snapshot of all the purpose areas in CTAS. Oh, we have a question. We have a fiscal year 2017 OJJDP Purpose Area 9 award. I asked the CTAS help desk if we were eligible to submit under this. I understood the response to say, no, we are not eligible. Yeah, I think you are eligible. Based on, they have this category, sorry, I'm going to go back. Number 2, continue or enhance existing tribal youth program. I think they were uninformed based on the words of the solicitation. Instead of calling the CTAS help desk, I would call your OJJDP grant manager and try and get confirmation that way. But I mean, the words on the page say current OJJDP grantees are eligible. So I would definitely submit an application, especially if it's Purpose Area 9, right? Can tribal organizations apply if they've been given authority through resolution by the federally recognized tribe for that region? Yes, I believe so. I believe that's exactly what it means. You have to just be cautious to ensure that there's not going to be a duplicative application such that like you're applying, but then the tribe is also applying. So you just want to make sure you're on the same page there. Our tribe is currently working toward a criminal code. We currently have a civil infraction code. Are we eligible for wellness court dollars under this model? What about PL 280? The answers are yes and yes. So purpose area 3 is not limited to wellness courts. It's totally open-ended, which would include, if you wanted to submit a proposal that like we would like to enhance our justice system to include code drafting to provide for criminal provisions. That sounds like Purpose Area 3 grant to me, sounds gorgeous, and definitely PL 280 tribes are eligible. This is one of the very few leveling areas in which PL 280 tribes are on the same plane as non-PL 280 tribes, which is great and definitely is not how it is, over on the Department of Interior side. Okay, moving right along. Just want to overview the application really quick. This is all very straightforward. It's very comparable to years past. And so like years past, there are certain percentages for each area. It's our recommendation to correlate your page numbers to match the percentage. And you can see your purpose area narrative is 50%. You should be putting at least half your effort into the narrative because that's definitely where the meat and potatoes are. I just wanted to give a visualization for my visual learners out there, what they sort of envision the actual proposal to look like. If your tribe is applying for multiple purpose areas, let's say 3, 8, and 9, you will submit 3 different purpose areas, maybe some attachments like letters of support or timelines, things like that, but you'll only submit 1 budget workbook and 1 tribal justice narrative. This is what I mean when I say there's a lot of interagency coordination that's required. If the police department is applying for a COPS grant and you're applying for a Purpose Area 8 Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court grant, you two are going to have to talk, even though there might not be much overlap between your purpose areas. You're submitting 1 tribal justice narrative, and that narrative has to speak to both purpose areas, which is really tricky. And this is where I think the burden on tribes is greater than on non-tribes, but so it is. On that website that I was just on, and I'm going to go back to it real quick, we have this solicitation link, which is great. In every other world, the solicitation link is all encompassing. All of the documents that you need are in the solicitation. When it comes to CTAS, that is not true. They have these external templates. You'll see the sample application timeline template, the cover sheet template, the sample profile template, and then all of these profile templates. You have to use these templates because in these templates, they have questions that you don't find in the solicitation, and yet you are going to be bound to answer. And so this web page is holy. You have to use this web page and you have to use the templates. In my mind, template is an optional tool that oh, here's a useful template that you could use or not use. In CTAS world, this is a mandatory tool that has the questions that you have to answer. It's like you were taking an exam in middle school and there was a whole back sheet that you didn't see and that everybody else saw. I think it's totally unfair, but this is the way they've organized it. Open those templates. So this is just a screenshot of the cover sheet template. They have a very specific thing in mind when they say cover sheet. And so here they literally have written out the words that they want you to include. Open the cover sheet template. Here's a screenshot of the tribal narrative profile template. The good news, they have increased the page number. It used to only be 10 pages, now it's 15. For those of you that have written a tribal narrative profile, you know that this is great news because you are asked to do the impossible. You're asked to essentially synthesize the entire history and structure of your government into now 15 pages instead of 10. You're also asked to weave all of the challenges facing your community and why that distills into what purpose areas you're applying for. Basically, it means only talk about the problems that you're actually proposing to address in your purpose areas. Sex trafficking might be a very significant issue. But if you're only applying for a healing to wellness court, then we really only want to focus on the substance abuse and criminal or civil infractions that we're trying to reduce because of our healing to wellness court. Remember, this tribal narrative profile template, it feels like it's optional. It's definitely mandatory. They have very specific questions that take up a whole page in and of themselves to list out, and you have to answer these. So definitely click on the template. This is just a very short worded version of what the template is. They have 2 new questions on here, and I can tell they're going to be tricky. For example, on number 4, they ask you to describe the significant issues, but in number 2, they ask you to identify the crime and public safety problems. Those sound the same to me, but apparently they're different, and you are going to be tasked with articulating both of those. So best of luck. You also know they address the need for financial assistance. Why are you applying to the CTAS? Why can't you afford to do this otherwise? They ask you to put together a timeline. These used to be optional. They appear to be mandatory. The good news for you is timelines are our friend. They are the place that we can really spell out and be specific about our objectives that we didn't have space to do in our purpose area narrative. Or you can be really simple about it. They can be a page. Either way, you want to make sure it exists, that you upload something, that the peer reviewer can click on something that says timeline and a document opens up. They provide this sample. I would say this is the only template that doesn't really provide any useful information. I think you have a lot of creativity to organize your timeline however you want. Make it super fancy, pretty, chart, whatever, or don't. Make it very, very simple. Either way, I encourage you to at least mirror the goals and objectives that you have identified in your purpose area. At a bare minimum, those should all be included. I think you get bonus points for providing some additional details. Our workbook, this is where we rely heavy on our fancy financial person within our tribe. Not only do they have to maneuver this extremely complicated Excel document, and it has to be in Excel, it has to be the template the DOJ provides, but they also have to do this for all of the purpose areas. Please give them time to do this. Please give them upfront what your budget is going to be. I see we have a question regarding font size requirements for the timeline document. It can be whatever you want it to be. As a peer reviewer, I like when all of the attachments are the same font and size. There is no page limit on the timeline. And so, your font size requirements for your narratives are standard 1-inch margins, double space, Times New Roman, 12-point font. And so that's exactly what I would use for my timeline, but you can use as many pages as you want to. So for the timeline, there is no requirement, but I would err on the side of mirroring what my prior document said. I've also seen applicants try and get fancy, putting their documents on legal size paper as opposed to letter size. Don't do this. Your peer reviewers are going to print your documents, and when it's on a different sheet of paper, your formatting gets all weird. I also recommend a PDF everything that you upload. Sometimes people leave it in a Word doc version, and then because people have different versions, the formatting gets all messed up. If you PDF it, it's the most likely to be safe so that your peer reviewer sees the same information. Is the budget detail workbook on the solicitation page? I believe that it is. Let's check. Oh, you know what? I think this is like a special thing that you have to download. Yeah, I apologize. I think it's a special thing you have to download because it's an Excel workbook. We will track this down and email it out to make sure everybody has this in our post email, but if for some reason you're able to find it, Marlon, I think we should send it out. So here's just a snapshot of what the worksheet looks like. And keep in mind there is a summary page. So for those in Excel, you have these little sheets. There's a summary page where they want you to input everything. It's like super fancy. Okay, the purpose areas. We only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to kind of fly through these. I apologize. But the good news is they are really, really comparable to last year's. Oh, thank you for that link, Marlon. Marlon just posted it in the questions box. So remember that each purpose area gets its own narrative. They have very straightforward questions. I mentioned those templates, then they have the questions. Your peer reviewer, when they're reading your application, they're going to be given a checklist. Their checklist, it's not a secret, it's exactly those questions. They're literally going to go through their checklist and see, did you answer each question? So you might be compelled to think that like, oh, I'm going to get really fancy and I'm going to weave my answer, you know, to weaving all of the questions together. I caution you against that. The peer reviewer is going to be reading a number of these applications, so as clear as you can make it, like allow the peer reviewer to check their boxes. They just want to go through one question to the next. The page limit here was really interesting. They said 10 to 15 pages. That's not a page limit, that's a range, but they provided a range, which to me suggests your purpose area better be at least 10 pages. But you're all joining this webinar, which suggests you are going above and beyond what you need to for this. And so I highly recommend that you max out your 15 pages. They ask for way more information than can possibly go into 15. And so really you're going to have to be paring down what you have in there. It should be 15. The good news, they have increased the funding, but only barely. It's 22 million. They are not mandated to completely award that entire amount, but hopefully they will. But this is the first time that we've seen the money go up significantly. And as I mentioned, the grant period is 5 years instead of 3. Here's what's actually been awarded in the last few years. As you can see, 2010 was our biggest year of 26 million. Our lowest year was in 2015. Hopefully, given the larger amount they're suggesting they're going to award, we'll see many more awards, but this still remains our second most competitive application. Purpose Area 3 I mentioned is extremely open-ended, but they do call out healing to wellness courts as a eligible potential category for funding. Lots of tribes do this. Every year there are a number of healing to wellness courts that are funded under Purpose Area 3. So this is a great purpose area. Here's just a snapshot of the template, the number of different questions. As you can see, they are pretty extensive. And so like I said, fitting into that 15 pages is going to be tricky. For guidance on here, I suggest if you're lost, if you don't have like a write-up ready to go for your healing to wellness court, that BJA adult drug court RFP that I mentioned at the top of the hour, it has a very structured approach to what drug courts are. And so if you're lost, you don't know where to begin, I would look at that when putting together my narrative, because it basically goes through like, what is a healing to wellness court? How do you have structure it? Who's on your team? What's your target population? That's a great way to communicate in this purpose area what you're trying to do for your healing to wellness court. Purpose Area 8, Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court. This is a category that is specific to wellness courts, but it's even more specific than that. It's specific to juvenile healing to wellness courts, which I believe they define up to 21 years old as your target population. In all respects, this is a very small purpose area. They anticipate awarding up to $2 million. This is up from 1.7 million, but still not that great. But current grantees are eligible, woo woo, and the length of the award is 5 years. And I mentioned there's the violent offender prohibition. Purpose Area 8, like Purpose Area 9, has really suffered. There's just really limited appropriation in this amount. And so they suggest that the funding will go up, but as you can see, even with that projection upwards, it's still nowhere close to where we were in 2015, 16, or 17. So, you know, that being said, this is not a terribly competitive purpose area. So if you're even toying with the idea of a juvenile healing to wellness court, this is a great one to consider. Purpose Area 8 used to be extremely regimented. They had like in month 1, you shall do this, and in month 3, you shall do this. It's still kind of regimented, but they've eased up a little bit. I do think it's important to note that grantees under this purpose area are required to complete a strategic plan, which includes attending a strategic planning meeting with your TA provider. So it is much more hands-on than Purpose Area 3. But that being said, if you thrive with structure, if you like being told, like this month we're going to do this, then you might enjoy this approach. And I know that many do, so more power to you. Like Purpose Area 3, they have a 15-page limit. The number of questions has been reduced, which I appreciate, but there's still a lot of them, so it's still going to be a challenge. Here's a snapshot.
There is a question.
Yeah.
Might a family drug court apply to either Purpose Area 8 Juvenile Drug Court or Purpose Area 3 Adult Drug Court as long as the age ranges served are compliant with the Purpose Area 3 and Purpose Area 9 requirements?
Yes, definitely for Purpose Area 3. Purpose Area 3 is totally open-ended. If you want, you could even apply for a juvenile wellness court in Purpose Area 3 if you wanted to, but certainly family. And by family, we mean a civil docket targeting families, usually with a child in need of services case or a child welfare case that is triggering the offense. And so we're operating it under the child welfare docket as opposed to the criminal docket. So Purpose Area 3, thumbs up, don't have to change a thing. Purpose Area 8, you will likely have to be a little bit more creative because here you're targeting like the children as opposed to the parents. But I think you could do it. Like, I don't see any like super explicit prohibition against it, but it's not what they have in mind. So you're kind of being a little tricky about like the explicit words that are allowing for the eligibility, but I think you could do it. Under Purpose Area 9, which is for the Tribal Youth Program, I think you have more flexibility because it's not within like the specific juvenile wellness court box, but Purpose Area 9 is like by far more competitive. So you can, it's just that, you know, where would I spend my effort? Probably on Purpose Area 8. Is applying for 2 or more purpose areas, does CTAS fund partial one purpose area or is it all or none? You know, I wish that they were thoughtful about it. Even though it's all one coordinated solicitation, once it goes to the different agencies, you should really think of it as different purpose areas. There does not appear to be much coordination. So if you're applying for Purpose Area 3 and 8, and it's like critical that they both be funded so that your program has like the right positions, you can't count on that. You could get both, you could get none, you could get one. They're really autonomous agencies making these decisions, and so it's not coordinated. So here are some resources if you're not already familiar. The Tribal Key Components, which is TLPI's publication. This is specifically referenced in Purpose Area 8. You will be asked to abide by the Tribal Key Components. But if you're applying under Purpose Area 3, I think it's great to reference that you're familiar with the Tribal Key Components. You intend on implementing your wellness court in compliance with the key components. And so it's definitely good like buzzwords to throw in there that you're familiar with the standards. Similarly, the adult drug court standards are general, applicable to tribes as well as states, counties, localities. So it's good to reference them, that you're familiar with them, you intend on abiding, but you don't need to go much deeper than that. I'm going to skip that for right now. And I'll just highlight this. You are not required in the proposal to note what how you're going to be doing your performance measures. You really only have to say like, yes, we will be collecting performance measures and reporting them. Hup, hup, hup. However, I think it's good bonus points to show that you're already thinking about what you're going to do for your performance measures. So they identify some. They also include, ooh, gosh, sorry, I moved something. They include these links on here with more. I would check those out and, you know, just throw them out there that you're familiar with them and you intend on collecting them. You really just want to display that, like, you have the capacity to receive this grant, implement it, and move the needle for your community, but for their purposes, that, like, you're going to abide by all of the reporting requirements. You're going to check all the boxes that they need, and everyone's going to be savvy. And so performance measures is a great way to communicate, like, we're going to be a good grantee. So with that, I think I will just leave with this tips page. A lot of these we already covered. Please go check out the templates. Note that if this is your first time doing CTAS, you're asked to upload the proposal on a GMS website. On the very last day when everybody else is uploading, the website has been known to be very slow or even crash. Don't let yourself be in that position where you are unable to upload your CTAS proposal because the website crashed, which is a totally lame reason. So give yourself a good day, maybe even 2 days, to finalize everything, PDF everything, and upload with enough time. And with that, I will end. I'd like to sincerely thank you for joining us. I know that participating in these time of things is really, you know, precious time out of your day. I salute you for putting together this really intense proposal. And any way that I or Tribal Law and Policy can help, we're eager to do so. I know at TLPI, you know, they're funded to provide technical assistance to grantees, but to all tribes also, and they really take that charge seriously. So whether or not you have a current grant, TLPI is there to help. And so with that, you know, I'll stay on the line if people have any more questions, but thank you very much.